scientific death.
On April 28, 1988, Aloha Airlines Flight 243 was cruising at 24,000 feet on a routine trip to Honolulu. Then, without warning, the quiet cabin was shattered by a deafening roar. An 18-foot section of the aircraft's upper roof had completely torn away. In an instant, the passengers and crew were exposed to the open sky, blasted by 300-mile-per-hour hurricane-force winds and freezing thin air. The sudden, explosive loss of cabin pressure acted like a violent vacuum. Clarabelle Lansing, a 58-year-old veteran flight attendant who was standing in the aisle serving drinks, was instantly swept out of the aircraft. The only reason the rest of the cabin didn't follow her into the sky was a matter of timing. The seatbelt sign was illuminated, and the passengers were tightly strapped in at the exact moment the decompression hit. Up front, the roar of the wind deafened the pilots. Captain Robert Schornstheimer looked behind him to see that the cockpit door was completely gone. The floor beams were buckling, snapping the cables to the left engine. The plane was actively tearing itself apart. The Boeing 737 had suffered catastrophic structural failure. It was now operating completely outside the bounds of any known aerodynamic model, and the survival of all 94 people left on board rested entirely on the crew. With the noise making verbal communication impossible, the pilots immediately donned their oxygen masks and used hand signals to coordinate. Captain Schornstheimer realized the hole was far too large to fix the cabin pressure, so he abandoned the idea and initiated an aggressive, steep descent toward Maui. This animated diagram shows the aerodynamic paradox the pilots were trapped in. When they tried to slow down, the severed fuselage began to flex and shake violently. To keep the airframe rigid and prevent the plane from snapping in half, they had to maintain a dangerously high approach speed of roughly 170 knots. Looking at these stress vectors, you can see why extending the wing flaps to act as an aerodynamic brake was so risky. Calculating the safe landing speed, or VREF, usually dictates full flaps, but doing so at high speeds would multiply the push and pull forces, risking tearing the remaining metal to the breaking point before they ever reached the runway. While the pilots managed the physics, the surviving flight attendants managed the human terror. Bleeding and battered, they crawled up the aisles, gripping the metal bars under the seats to fight the wind, instructing passengers to don life vests and brace for a landing without nose gear. 13 minutes after the explosion, the plane touched down at Kahului Airport. Captain Schornstheimer later described the airframe feeling springy, like being on the end of a diving board. Yet the nose gear locked and the aircraft held together without catching fire. By acting as real-time test pilots for an aircraft missing its roof, Schornstheimer and Tompkins successfully landed a plane that was structurally compromised and flying outside its design limits. Once the survivors were safe, investigators had to figure out how a highly regulated commercial airliner could simply unzip in the middle of a flight. To understand what went wrong, we can look directly at the National Transportation Safety Board's official accident report. This diagram illustrates how an aircraft fuselage physically reacts to flight. Every time a plane ascends and pressurizes, the metal expands like a breathing lung and contracts when it lands. This is called a flight cycle. By the day of the accident, this specific Boeing 737 had been cycled 89,680 times. To save weight, early 737 models used an epoxy cold bond to glue the overlapping fuselage panels together. But years of operating in Hawaii's salty, moist air caused this adhesive to degrade, rot, and eventually disbond completely. With the glue gone, all the structural stress of those pressurization cycles shifted onto the mechanical rivets holding the panels together. This caused widespread fatigue damage. Microscopic, invisible cracks began to form simultaneously at dozens of rivet holes along the fuselage joint. The airplane was designed with built-in fail-safes called tear straps, which you can see described in this section of the NTSB report. They were meant to contain single, isolated fractures, but because the cracks formed simultaneously across multiple rivets, they completely bypassed these safety measures. The mechanical failure compounded a human one. The report highlights how maintenance crews, working long night shifts under poor hangar lighting, simply missed these microscopic warning signs, succumbing to the natural effects of circadian rhythms and task fatigue. The explosive decompression of Flight 243 was the inevitable climax of invisible, systemic mechanical rot compounding with human inspection fatigue over tens of thousands of flights. The shocking images of the convertible airliner forced immediate, sweeping changes. The U.S. Congress passed the Aviation Safety Research Act, overhauling how regulatory bodies around the world monitor and maintain aging aircraft. Regulators established a new ultimate standard known as the limit of validity. This placed a strict, uncompromising expiration date on every commercial aircraft, measured in total flight cycles, after which the plane is legally barred from flying. The industry also mandated advanced non-destructive testing. Instead of relying on tired human eyes to spot microscopic metal fatigue, mechanics now use specialized tools like eddy current scanners to detect structural weaknesses long before they threaten the airframe. While the plane was scrapped, the emotional toll lingered. Captain Schornstheimer suffered from severe PTSD following the accident. Recognizing this gap in pilot care, First Officer Tompkins dedicated herself to helping the Airline Pilots Association build a critical incident response program to support future traumatized crews. A moment of reflection. Though her body was never recovered, Clarabelle Lansing's 37 years of service are honored today in a permanent memorial garden at Honolulu Airport, a quiet tribute to the only life lost that afternoon. Aloha Flight 243 stands as the moment the aviation world realized that structural safety is never permanent. It proved that a single oversight in maintenance could lead to an explosive decompression, making the rigorous inspection of aging jets a matter of international law.